Good morning, students. Welcome once again to the ICAI classes for CA Intermediate Cost and Management Accounting. And today we will be revising overheads and ABC costing. So, as we know, overheads is something. Let's first discuss a few concepts. Overheads. Overheads are those costs which are not directly traceable to a cost object. So, these are indirect, and therefore, these overheads are required to be either allocated or apportioned and absorbed. So overheads are basically different types, like you will come across production overheads. One of the ways to classify the overheads is production overheads. A good example of this is depreciation on machine. There can be administrative and office overheads. For example, the depreciation of office building, or furniture, the legal costs, auditors' fees, printing, stationery, and another is your selling and distribution overheads. So advertisements, salesmen, salaries, the transportation cost to carry the finished goods to the warehouses or to the retailers, final packaging cost of goods, cartons, etc. These are selling and distribution overheads. Another way of classifying the overheads is also on the basis of uh, elements like material, labor, or indirect expenses. So in production overheads, depreciation of machines is an indirect expenses. The payment made to supervisors or foremen who look after that the workers are working properly, this is indirect labor. The lubricants used or the fuel used to manufacture the product, they become a indirect material element of production overheads. So another way of classifying is material, labor, and on the basis of elements. Similarly, in administration and office overheads, depreciation of office building, this is a indirect expense. Legal fees, auditor fees, director's fees, this is this is the labor cost of administrative overheads. Printing and stationery, the stationery could be the material cost. Similarly, in selling and distribution, advertisement is an expense. Salesman's salary becomes labor, and the packaging that you use to transport the goods to the retailers and to the market, that becomes material. Another way of classifying is whether they are fixed, variable, or semi-variable. So here, if the legal fees paid to the lawyers or directors, this is fixed, then it becomes a fixed expense. Similarly, if you have permanent salesmen and you make payment to them, that becomes a fixed expense. But if the salesmen salaries are a function or a variable related to the sales they achieve, then it becomes variable. And sometimes you have expenses like semi-variable. For example, the electricity bill in your houses, a part of it is fixed and a part of it is dependent upon how much electricity you consume. So it becomes a semi-variable. And another way of classifying the overheads is also whether you can control them or they are non-controllable. So we should try to control as much possible those overheads which are controllable and keep them to the minimum. Similarly, they can also be classified as avoidable or unavoidable. Now, the whole concept is how to allocate the various overheads to the various cost objects or products. So when allocation is done, so we have exact idea, we can trace the cost to the particular cost object here. For example, uh, let's say rent is paid. So rent becomes a overhead. And let's say there are two products, X and Y. So the rent to be, they work in different factories or different buildings. And the rent paid by X is 20,000, let's say, and the rent paid by Y is 10,000. So it is allocated that X has to bear a rent of 20,000 and Y has to bear a rent of 10,000. However, if the total rent paid was 30,000, and it is to be borne by X and Y, two departments or two products or two cost objects, we will apportion them amongst X and Y in some reasonable basis. So we must take a reasonable base on which we will apportion the costs. So 30,000 would be apportioned between X and Y, let's say in the ratio of the area occupied by X and Y. So this is apportioning the cost or the overhead cost amongst the products in the on a reasonable basis. So whatever the cost is, whatever is the nature of overhead, we will understand that and we will see that what makes the best apportionment or what makes the best basis for apportioning this expense to the various cost objects. The third is absorption. Here the overheads are absorbed on a predetermined basis. So you already know that what is the uh, predetermined absorption rate and you will apply that only. This is to be also calculated on the basis of past experience and the industry. That's how you establish a predetermined rate. So when the expenditure is exactly 30,000 and you know that it is incurred 20,000 by X and 10,000 by Y, so the total expense is also 30,000 and what is allocated is also 30,000, 20 and 10. Then again in apportionment, the total expense is 30,000 which is a portion between X and Y in the ratio of the area occupied by the two products or departments. So then again, the total is also 30,000. But if there is a predetermined rate, it is possible that absorbed overheads are something else and actual overheads are different. So there can be sometimes a variation or variance between the two, which leads us to the concept of either overabsorption or underabsorption. I'll give another example. For example, there is a house which has 5 rooms, and one room is separately out of this five, one room is given on rent. So if there is an electricity bill and the tenant has a sub-meter, then the electricity bill is allocated. So whatever the tenant pays is what he consumes, and whatever you pay is whatever you consume. But if there is no sub-meter for the tenant's portion, then you divide it on a reasonable basis. So here I see that 4 rooms are occupied by you and one room is occupied by the tenant. So it is 4:1. That is how you divide the electricity bill when there is no sub-meter, 4:1. And sometimes what happens, the electricity reading is not taken or something happens. Then what happens, the electricity department gives you a bill on a basis of average. So that is absorption. So electricity department has applied this method. The electricity bill generated is on the basis of absorption. So whatever has been the predetermined rate in the past, an average is taken of that. On that basis, your electricity bill is generated. So in absorption, there can always be sometimes overabsorption, sometimes underabsorption. When do we say there is overabsorption? So for example, the predetermined rate is 10 rupee per hour, and the work was executed for 1,000 hours. So how much would be the absorbed overheads? 1,000 into 10, rupees 10,000 on the basis of predetermined rate. So the absorbed overheads are rupees 10,000, whereas actual overheads are, let's say, 8,000 or 13,000. So if actual overheads are 8,000, but absorbed is 10,000, this becomes a case of over-absorption when actual is less than absorbed. And similarly, if actual is 13,000, whereas absorbed is 10,000, so this becomes a case of under-absorption. That means actual expenditure was higher, but we have applied only 10,000, which is less. So when there is a over-absorption, what happens is your profits, your expenditure becomes more, and therefore your profits are unnecessarily less in cost accounting. Whereas when there is an under-absorption, the expenses are booked less, whereas actual expenditure was more. So you have a higher or inflated profit unnecessarily, which is wrong. So you might need to reconcile it or make an adjustment, right? So overheads are either allocated, apportioned, or absorbed. In absorption, there can always be overabsorption or underabsorption. When actual expenditure is less, we say it's an overabsorption. And when actual is more than the absorbed, then there is a case of underabsorption, right? So these are the three ways in which we will allocate, apportion, or absorb the overheads. Now, what is the basis on which absorption is done? So the basis of absorption can be like if a industry is material intensive, so we can absorb the overheads on the basis of material cost. For example, if material cost is said to be 100,000 and the overheads are experienced in the past, let's say at 60% of material cost. So the overheads absorbed would be 60,000. Sometimes the industry is labor intensive, so you can also absorb the overheads on the basis of labor cost. For example, labor cost is total labor cost is 60,000 and we say that the absorption rate is 100% of labor cost. So again, the overheads absorbed would be 60,000. Sometimes you take prime cost when material and labor both are important. So let's say if the prime cost is 1,50,000 and you say that the overheads are absorbed at the rate of 40% of prime cost. So in that case, once again, the absorbed overheads would be 60,000. It is not necessary that absorption should give you the same answers. Whatever the basis you follow, you might get different answers for the total overheads absorbed. Then there are other methods also, like we can say basis on the labor hours, not on the total labor cost, but on the basis of total labor hours. So like I said in the previous example, 1,000 hours are worked, and let's say the absorption rate is 50 rupee per hour. So in that case, the total absorbed overheads would be 50,000. Sometimes it is machine intensive, automated processes are there. So in that case, we don't go by labor hour, we follow the machine hour rate. So let's say the machine has worked for 500 hours and the absorption rate is 60 rupee per hour of machine. So in that case, the overheads absorbed would be 30,000 rupees. So these are some of the bases on which we can absorb or we can create the base for absorption of overheads. Another important thing is when you divide the overheads, there is two types of distribution. One is primary distribution and another is secondary distribution. So let's talk about primary distribution. For example, there are 5 departments in A, B, C, and XY. So all the three ABC are production departments and X and Y are service departments. So for example, let's do the primary distribution. For example, rent is to be given. We will apportion the rent here. Let's say the total rent is 100,000. So the basis of apportionment of rent is the area occupied. And let's say on that basis, 60,000, 20,000, 5,000, 10,000, and 5,000. So this is what I have done here is a primary distribution. I have apportioned the rent on the basis of area amongst the all 5 departments. Similarly, let's say there is employee related canteen expenses. So let's say canteen expenses are 30,000. So I have divided it, the basis for dividing the canteen expenses could be how many number of meals was consumed by each of the departments by total workers, or else I could say also how many number of workers or employees were there. So let's say the 30,000 is divided amongst the canteen expenses of 30,000 divided amongst ABC, X and Y in the ratio of the number of employees which are there in each of the department. And let's say this comes out to be 5,000, 6,000, 4,000, 5,000, and 10,000. So this concept is primary distribution. Now, one of the ways of absorbing the overheads or apportioning the overheads or tracing or charging the overheads back to the products is also dependent upon one of the reasons sometimes we give is how much is the capacity of each department to bear. So if there is a research and development department, that department does not have the capacity to absorb overheads because it will not be able to generate revenue. Sometimes we have a new product and we know that there is a long gestation period. It will not be productive or profitable for a number of years initially. So maybe initially we will not charge overheads to that. So similarly here, when we see that ABC are three production department and X and Y are service departments, so the overheads were apportioned to the service departments also, and both the service departments had to bear a overheads cost of 15,000. But service departments are not manufacturing anything. They are not generating revenue. They are only providing services to the production department to smoothen the operations or production. So the service department's overheads should again be allocated or charged back to the production departments. That concept is called as secondary distribution. So when service departments expenses or share of overheads is apportioned again back to the production department, that is called as this is secondary distribution. Once again, we will take the secondary distribution will take a reasonable basis on which the service department expenses should be divided amongst the production department. For example, service department X is maintenance. So it takes care of the machines and the repairs of the machines. So to allocate the service department's X expenditure amongst ABC, the best basis would be the value of machines maybe. Or if the machines are working for a certain number of hours, we can multiply the value of the machine with the machine hour and then allocate the maintenance expenses or the service department overheads of maintenance amongst production departments. Let's say department Y is the stores department. So the job of stores is to store the raw materials and spare parts and provide them to the production department as and when they need. So if it is a stores department, the best way of allocating the or sharing the joint overheads cost of 15,000 of department Y, which is a stores department, amongst ABC should be the material cost. That would become the best reasonable basis. So you have to see what the nature of service department is. And on that basis, you decide how much, what should be the basis of apportionment of the service department overheads, again back to the production department. Maybe the question will tell you exactly in what ratio or in what percentage you have to allocate on a portion, or maybe you will be able to use your own logic basis the nature of the service department and the information provided. Similarly, if Y is human resource department, so the job of human resource department will be to recruit the workers or employees for all the departments. So in that case, you will see that the services of Y will be available not just to ABC, but also X. So the engineers or whosoever person is required to be recruited to maintain the machines, that recruitment will also be done by the service department Y. So sometimes the benefit of a service department goes only to the production departments. Sometimes the benefit of the service department goes to all the departments, not just production department, but other service departments also. So if the benefit goes to, let's say, X is a service department and it is to be allocated in the ratio of 40%, 40%, 20%. So it's simple that the benefit of X is going to A, B, C in the ratio of 4:4:2. Yeah, Asta, if other overheads are given, uh, we will see what basis makes more suitable for them. So that we will take with the example. Okay. So X department expenses overheads are apportioned between A, B, and C in the percentage of 40%, 40%, and 20%. And Y department's expenditure is given to ABC in the ratio of 30, 30, and 40. So 3:3:4. So this is a simple case where the benefit of X and Y, the service department benefit is reaped by only the production department. However, if I say that the benefit of X goes to ABC and also to Y, so if I make this 10% and this also 10%. So benefit of X is going to A, B, C, and Y, but the benefit of Y is going only to A, B, C, right? So what will happen now? If you distribute this 15,000, you will give it to A, B, C, and Y. So the total of Y will not be 15,000, but some portion of X will also come to Y. So let's say 2,000. So now 15,000 should not be allocated amongst ABC, but 15 plus 2, 17,000 should be apportioned between A, B, C in the ratio of 30, 30, and 40%, right? And similarly, had it been that the benefit of X is going to only ABC because X being maintenance department, and the benefit of Y going to A, B, C, and X. So in that case, remember, first distribute Y. So when you will distribute 15,000 to A, B, C, 4,500, 4,500, 4,500, and 10%, 1,500 will go to X. So the total of X will not be 15,000, but it will be 16,500. So 16,500 will be distributed amongst A, B, C in the ratio of 40, 40, and 20. So this is important that the benefit of a service department can go only to production department. In that case, things are simple. But the second thing is the benefit of the service departments can go to other service departments also. Then you have to see that there can be a step method. So this one was step method. Why? Because first we will distribute Y because Y's benefit is going to X also, whereas X benefit is going to only ABC. So you have to create steps. So first step, Y has to be distributed because it is to be distributed amongst A, B, C, and X. And then X will be distributed because it is to be distributed amongst A, B, and C. Right? So this is a step method. And third, there can be reciprocal methods also, like the benefit of X is going to Y and the benefit of Y is going to X. So if X is, let's say, not maintenance department, but X is uh, canteen. So the what happens is Y is HR, X is canteen. So what will happen? Y will hire the employees for A, B, C, as well as the cooks, chefs, and the assistant and helpers for department X also. And X being canteen, everyone in the organization consumes the services of the canteen, which means that the workers of A, B, C, and Y also eat in the canteen, which is X department. So this is reciprocal. If both ratios are there, means X to Y and Y to X. Then there cannot be any sequence. Then you have to follow reciprocal distribution, right? So we have talked about three aspects here. One is primary distribution, when the expenditure is charged to all the departments, whether they are production departments or whether they are service departments. And then service departments themselves do not have the capacity to recover their expenses. So the service department expenses are again charged back to the production departments, and that is called secondary distribution. So once again, in secondary distributions, the expenditure of X and Y can be divided amongst ABC, let's say 40, 40, 20, and Y is 30, 30, 40. This is percentage. So in that case, there is no problem. Why? Because 15,000 will be shared between ABC in the ratio of 40, 40, 20. So 6,000 will go to A, 6,000 will go to A, B, and 3,000 will go to C. For Y, 4,500 will go to A, 4,500 will go to B, and 6,000 will go to C, and the job is complete. Right? Second, if X and Y's benefit goes to then you have to see in this is step ladder. In this, you will have to see which one is to be distributed first. So if you distribute 15,000 first amongst ABC, 40, 40, 20, then the job is done for X. Then you distribute Y, 20, 20, 40, 20. Then you have something, 20% again coming to X. So you will have to redistribute X again to ABC. So this will create problems. So in step ladder, identify, first distribute that service department expenses, which has the maximum number of allocations. So there are four departments in which Y is to be distributed and three in which X is to be distributed. So first Y will be distributed. So in that way, some portion of Y will come to X, 3,000, and the total of X will then become 18,000, and 18,000 will be distributed amongst ABC, 40, 40, 20. So 7,200, 7,200, and 3,600. So even if there were 10 service departments and three production departments, so first distribute that service department, which is distributing to 9. Then pick up that service department, which is distributing to 8. Then pick up that service department, which is distributing to 6. Then 5, 4, 3, so on. The third case, which you've also pointed out in the chat window, what if the benefit of X goes to Y and the benefit of Y goes to X? Let's say 40, 30, 20, and 10% of X goes to Y. Similarly, Y 30, 30, 35, and 5% benefit of Y goes to X also. So this is the case of reciprocal service method, where the two service departments are giving services to each other. So this is an example when X is maintenance department and Y is stores department. This is when X is maintenance department and Y is HR department. And this is when X is canteen and Y is HR. So if it is only maintenance and stores, the raw materials are supplied to production departments, and the machines which are there in ABC department, they are being maintained. But if this is maintenance, so maintenance is done for ABC only, whereas Y is the HR department, it recruits workers for ABC as well as for the maintenance department's engineers. But if X is canteen, Y is HR. So Y will recruit for all the departments, including the chefs and the cooks and the helpers, attendants for X. And the X being, let's say, the canteen department. So all the employees of A, B, C, and Y also come and eat in the canteen. The allocation of the service department expense to itself will not be done. The first one is simple, second one is step ladder, third is reciprocal services method. So in reciprocal services, once again, we follow three methods. Either you can solve it using simultaneous equation method, or you can follow it repeated distribution. And third, there is also a method which is trial and error. Though it's called trial and error, but you get exact answer. No problem with the outcome. Okay. So how does this reciprocal services work? So once again, I'll change the figures this time. Let's say X total expenditure is 10,000 and Y's total expenditure is 6,000. So it's simple, 10,000, 40, 40, 20, 6,000, 30, 30, 40. Second case, step ladder. First distribute Y. So 6,000, 20%, that is 1,200, 1,200, 2,400, and 1,200 goes to X also. So the X total will not be 10,000. Now it will be 10,000 plus 1,200 from Y. So you will distribute 11,200 amongst ABC in the ratio of 40, 40, 20. But if it is reciprocal services, so let me apply the simultaneous equation method here. So I'm solving allocation or apportioning the total of 16,000 amongst ABC ultimately. But there is a problem that some part of X goes to Y and some part of Y goes to X. So what is X? X is 10,000. How much is X? It is 10,000 plus some portion of Y. How much? 5% Y. So how much should be the total of from X? 10,000, which is there, plus 5% of Y will go to X. Then what is y? Y is 6,000 plus some portion of x. How much? 10% x. 10% x, right? So how much is x? 10,000 plus 5% of y. And how much is y? Y is 6,000 plus some portion of x, which is 10%. So x allocates 40, 30, 20, and 10% to y. So y is not just 6,000, but 10% of x. But we don't know what x is until and unless we know that how much will be coming to y. Now substitute this value of y in the first equation. So x is actually 10,000 plus 5%. Instead of 5%, I'm writing 0.05 of y. So y is 6,000 plus 0.1x. So when you will solve this, you will get 10,000 plus 0.005x, and 5% of 6,000 is 300. I could have written 10,000 plus 300 plus 0.005x. So x is equal to 10,300 plus 0.005x. So when this goes here, 0.995x is equal to 10,300. Therefore, x is equal to 10,300 divided by 0.995. So ultimately, x is 10,352 rounded off. 51.75 is rounded off to 10,352 rupees. Then what is y? 6,000 plus 10% of x. Now we know how much is x. So 10% of this will be 1035. So y is equal to 7035. Okay. So now what you will do? You will distribute 10,352 amongst A, B, C. Not in the ratio of 432. Remember, don't do that. If you divide 10,352 in the ratio of 432, that will be wrong. You have to divide 10,352. 40% goes to A, 30% goes to B, 20% goes to C. So ultimately, 90% of this will be divided amongst ABC. Okay. So although it is 40, 30, 20, don't take this as ratio, take it as percentage only. Otherwise, you will end up dividing 10,352 fully in the amongst APC, but we have to divide only 90% of 10,352. Similarly, 7035, 30% goes to A, 30% goes to B, and 35% goes to C. Okay, so you will see that 95% of Y is distributed. In order to check your answers, what you can do here is 10,352 into 0.9, that is 9,316, and 7035 into 0.95, that is 6683 or 84. These two totals should be exactly 16,000. Okay, these two totals should be 16,000. So if you distribute 90% of X and 95% of Y amongst ABC, then you can take the ratio of 432 and 33, 30, 30, 35. But otherwise, 10,352's 90% should be given between them. So 40% of 10,352 should be going to A, 30% of 10,352 should be going to B, and 20% of 10,352 should go to C. In that way, you will distribute 90% of 10,352, which is 9,316. Similarly, Y comes out to be 7035. So 7035, 30% goes to A, 30% goes to B, and 35% goes to C. So this is how you are going to solve it using simultaneous equation. What will you do in repeated distribution? I am erasing this. If you want to take a screenshot, you can take it here. So I'm coming on to second method, repeated distribution. So in repeated distribution, we keep on distributing the expenses amongst the four or five departments that we have. And until and unless the figure becomes almost less than 1, we continue to do this. So if I follow 3, 2, repeated distribution, what will happen? A, B, C, X, Y. I'll write here 10,000 for X and 6,000 for Y. And now I will distribution, redistribute or distribution of X in the ratio amongst ABC as 40%, 30%, 20%, and 10% in A, B, C, and Y. So when 10,000 is distributed, what do we get? 4,000 goes to A, 3,000 goes to B, 2,000 goes to C, and 1,000 goes to Y. Now the total of Y becomes 7,000. Redistributing Y amongst A, B, C, X in the ratio of 30, 30, 35, and 5. Or you can say 6, 6, 7, and 1. So 2,100, 7,000 here. This is 2,100. This is 2,100. This is 2,450. And X will also get 350. Once again, you will redistribute X amongst A is to C is to Y in the ratio of 4 is to 3 is to 2 is to 1. So when this 350 will be distributed, then 4 is to 3 is to 2 is to 1. So 35 into 4, 140 goes to A, 105 goes to B, 70 goes to C, and 35 again comes to Y. Again, distribute this 35, redistribution of Y in the ratio of 6 is to 6 is to 7 is to 1. 35 divided by 20 is 1.75. So 10.5 will go to A, 10.5 will go to B, 12.25 will go to C, and also 1.75 will come to X. Okay. So now again distribute 1.75 of X amongst A, B, C, and Y in the ratio of 4:3:2:1. So now this will come out to be 0.175. But 1.75 into 4, this is 0.7, 0.525, and 0.35. So this is the last you would do. In this way, almost this becomes zero. Here there is a negligible portion of only 17 paisa. So if you will allocate 17 paisa among 6671, it's negligible. So this will be the total allocated overheads to A, to B, and C. You will do the totals. X and Y will be nullified, and A, B, C will remain. So this is, you keep on doing it until and unless you get some figures which is less than 1. That is when you can stop. So this is the redistribution method, right? Once again, you can take a screenshot for this and then I'll erase. The next method is trial and error. So in trial and error, what we do is we will get the same answers as 10,352 and 70935. Though we may not be using a calculator, we can do it almost without a calculator. So let me start with trial and error. I'm using a different color pen so that you can distinguish. So the total of X is 10,000 and the total of Y is 6,000. From this information, right, you can see that 10% of X goes to Y and 5% expense of Y goes to X. So you can start with anything. So first distribute 10% of X to Y. This is 10,000. Distribute 10% of 10,000, it will become 1,000. So now the total in X will be 7,000. Distribute 5% of 7,000, 350. Distribute 10% of 350, 35. Distribute 5% of 35 to X. 5% of 35 would be 1.75. And maybe distribute 10% of this to Y, 0.175. Now you take the total of this. This is 10,351.75 and this is 7,035.175. So you can round this off to 10,352 and this is 7,035. So whatever we did in simultaneous equation, we get exactly the same answer, 10,352 and 70. Okay. So this is how you will distribute the secondary distribution. If the benefit of the service department goes only to production department, it becomes easy. If the benefit of one service department goes to the all other production departments and other service departments, but then the second service department or the third service department gives only benefit to the production department, you follow the step ladder in which you identify first, take that service department where there is maximum apportionment. And then you have the benefit of one service department going to the other and the benefit of the other service department going to the first. In that case, this is reciprocal services. You can either follow simultaneous equation, repeated distribution, or trial and error. In exam, when you get these questions, generally they will specifically might ask you to follow simultaneous equation or repeated distribution. But trial and error is not something that is being asked. But generally, that is the fastest and easiest. Without calculators, also, you can just do the total. So do verify your answers using trial and error definitely. Okay. So these were some of the basic concepts. And let's start with questions on the basis of overheads, whatever we have learned so far. So first question, there is a factory. Overhead of a particular department is recovered on the basis of rupee 5 per machine hour. The total expenses incurred and the actual machine hours for the department for the month of August was 80,000 and 10,000. So 80,000 was the actual overheads and actual hours, machine hours worked were 10,000. Absorption rate is rupee 5 per machine hour. So on that basis, your absorbed overheads are 10,000 hours into 5, which is equal to 50,000. So if we don't have any other information, we see that this is a case of under absorption, and under absorption is by 30,000. So actual overheads were 80, absorbed is 50. So there is a under absorption by 30,000. But it's giving us some further details. Out of the 80,000, 15,000 became payable due to an award of the labor code. So this was some dispute going on with some workers. So the labor code gave an award in favor of the worker, and 15,000, let's say, uh, because of the award, 15,000 is to be paid to the labor. That's why in this particular month, the expenditure turned out to be 80,000. So we can say that not every month will have a award. It's just an extraordinary item which happens once in a while. So this is a non-recurring item. So we cannot say that the expenditure for August was 80, rather 80 minus 15, it was 55, 65, because this will not happen again and again. So we cannot say that our overheads are under absorbed by 30. That means we are close to our 65. But there is another 5,000, which is related to the previous year booked in the current month, August. So past period also is there. Past period expense, which have been charged to the August of this month, 5,000. So if these two are deducted from the actual overheads of 80,000, so subtract non-recurring item and past period expense. So the overheads are only 60,000. Normal overheads. Now absorbed are anything else? Nothing. So then we have actual production was 40,000 units, out of which 30,000 units was sold. And on analyzing the reasons, it was found 60% of the under-absorbed overheads was due to defective planning, and the rest was attributed to normal cost increase. How would you treat the under-absorbed overheads in the cost accounts? So the question is that 80,000 expenditure was incurred in the month of August, out of which 15,000 was because of the labor court award and 5,000 related to the previous period. So actually 60,000 was the overheads which is incurred in the month of August, though absorbed was 50,000. So there is an expenditure of 10,000 which is not recorded but which is incurred. So this is under absorption. Now, how will you treat the under absorption? There are different methods of treatment of under absorption. Number one, you can charge it to costing P&L account. This you do when there is abnormality. Second, you can create supplementary rates. Or you can create a overhead suspense account or control account in which there can be a debit balance or a credit balance depending upon whether there is a under absorption or over absorption. So there can be under absorption in 1 year, over absorption in next year with a slight amount, not because of any abnormal reason. So this account will continue and over a period of long run, it should balance. Okay. Now, if you are seeing that there is a under absorption or in all the years, so what will be your journal entries basically? Your journal entries would be overheads to bank. Let's say when you have made the payment, overheads to bank or cost ledger control account if you are following non-integrated. So overheads was 60,000, for example, in this case. And overheads that were absorbed to the work in progress account was 50,000. So there is a case of under absorption. You see overheads are debit by 60, credited by 50. So you will credit further. And you will say overhead control account. Either you take it to the costing P&L or you can say overhead control account debit or suspense account debit to overheads. So your overhead suspense account or control account will have an entry to overheads, 10,000. So there is a debit balance when there is a under absorption. And naturally so. Why? Because your expense was 60,000, but you have recorded only 50,000 by absorbing 60,000, 50,000. So there is another 10,000 expense which is to be recorded. So expense will be debited. However, if there was over absorption, let's say this was 60 and this was 70, then you would see that your overhead account is credited by 70 but debit by 60. So you will have to debit it to overheads debit to overhead suspense. In that case, overhead control or overhead suspense will be credited. Okay. But if you observe that there is a under absorption in year one, under absorption in year two, under absorption in year three, under absorption in year four, five, six, that means your predetermined rates are not correct. They are not appropriate. So if your predetermined rates needs to be revised, if they are appropriate, and everything is normal. Maybe 1 year you have under absorption, so there is a debit balance. In the second year, you will have over absorption, so this will balance out in the second year. And third year again, maybe there is a over absorption, so by some amount. So again, there is a credit balance. And then in the fourth year, again, there is a under absorption. So sometimes over absorption, sometimes under absorption. This account will balance out in the long run. So these are the three ways in which you will do. Now here what has happened is there is an under absorption by 10,000. So here we will use two methods. One is costing P&L because there is a abnormality. What was abnormality? Defective planning. How much? 60% was due to abnormal or defective planning. And secondly, we will use supplementary rate as the question is very clearly mentioning that there is finished goods stock as well as there is goods sold. So in a factory, overheads were recovered on the basis of 5 per machine hour. Expenses incurred was 80,000 in 10,000 hours. So we see that 50,000 overheads are absorbed. Out of 80,000, 15,000 because of labor award and 5,000 because of past period. So we will deduct that. That means in the month of August, the overheads were 60,000. That means there is an under absorption by 10,000. Two more information is given. One is production is 40,000, out of which 30,000 sold. So we will bifurcate 40,000 into goods sold 30,000 and closing stock 10,000. So whatever the under absorbed overheads are, out of that 60% is because of defective planning and rest is attributed to normal cost increase. So out of the 10,000, 6,000 will go to costing P&L and 4,000 will go to be used for supplementary rates. So these 40,000 units will bear the 4,000 rupees extra cost increase. 60%. So if there is a under absorption, what is the journal entry? Costing P&L account debit to overheads. So you will debit the costing P&L account. So one entry you will pass is costing profit and loss account debit 6,000 and overheads credit 6,000. So you see overheads was debit by 60,000, overheads was credit by 50,000, and now we have credited by another 6,000. Costing P&L account debit to overheads. The remaining 4,000 will be borne by 40,000 units. So the supplementary rate is 0.10 per unit. So finished stock has 10,000 units. So 1,000, the value of finished stock will increase. So increase in value of an asset is debited 1,000 and goods sold 30,000. 30,000 into 0.10. By 3,000, we will increase the cost of goods sold. So debit all expenses. So whatever the goods sold has increased, cost of goods sold account will increase by 3,000 and overheads would be credited by another 4,000. So this is how you will treat. Just a small example, if in this case it had been said that 30,000 units were completed and sold and 10,000 units were 60% complete. They were not 100% complete. So you will not call it finished goods stock account, you will call it WIP account. And 60% of 10,000 is 6,000. So the total completed units is equivalent to 30,000 plus 6,000. 4,000 expenditure would be borne between 36,000. Supplementary rate would be different. And then whatever the rate comes out, multiplied by 30,000 will go to cost of goods sold and multiplied by 6,000 will go to WIP account. Okay. So this is how you're going to treat under absorption and over absorption. Now let us look at this question, which I have already explained, and like I have asked you, some of you asked in the chat window, how other expenses are to be distributed. So let's take a question. PH Limited is a manufacturing company. It has three production departments, A, B, C, and two service departments, X and Y. This is the budget for the month of December. Direct material. Why I have taken up this question further? Because it has two particular items here, direct material and direct wages. So you must have learned by now what is direct material. Is it a overhead? No. Direct material is part of prime cost. It's not overheads. So direct material, direct labor, and direct expenses are part of prime cost. Similarly, direct labor, is it a overhead? No. But these two expenses are not overheads for A, B, C, but they are overheads for service department X and Y. Direct material for service department X. X, let's say X is uh, maintenance. So it could be the lubricants, grease, oiling that is required to run the machines. Okay. If other overheads, what is both ratio step better, I have to address, right? So they are not overheads for A, B, C, the production department, but this two, three, four, these four items are overheads. Okay. Next type of overheads are given as factory rent. It is not given for A, B, C, X, and Y. It is given only factory rent. I'll not go into the presentation because of a little constraint of time. I'll do it here itself. You will create one more column. You will write factory rent. Then you will write what is the basis for apportionment of factory rent. So you have some additional information here. Area, capital value, machine hours, horsepower of the machine. So what do you think is the most appropriate logic behind distributing rent? Should not it be area? So you will write that the basis is area. And on the basis of that, ratio comes out to be 500 ratio 250 ratio 500 ratio 250 ratio 500. So I'll call it 2 is to 1 is 2 is to 1 is to 2. So factory rent will be divided in the ratio of 2 is to 1 is to 2 is to 1 is to 2. 8. 500 into 2, 1000. 500, 1000, 500, and 1000. Right? Second is power. So what do you think is the basis for power amongst these four? You have a word here also. Horsepower of the machines is given. Ratio is 50, 40, 20, 15, 25. So the ratio is 10 is to 8 is to 4 is to 3 is to 5. So 22 and 30. 2500 divided by 30 into 10. So 833. 666.66. So I'll call it 667. 333. 250. 416. So if I put here 6, 6 plus 3, 9, 9 and 10, 19. So I'll call it 7. Okay. Yes. Right, Asta. Depreciation. What do you think should be the reason for depreciation? So if it had been depreciation of only machines, I could have taken the value of machines and multiplied by machine hours also. But it is depreciation. So maybe more than machine assets are also involved. And I have also not used this information. So it's best to take it in the ratio of 20, 40, 20, 10, 10. So this makes it the ratio is capital value, basis is capital value, and the ratio is 2 is to 4 is to 2 is to 1 is to 1. Okay. So 200, 400, 200, 100, and 100. Then you have some other overheads. Other overheads can be divided in the ratio of direct wages. But here we have some information which we have not used. So maybe you can assume that the overheads were having a relation with the machine hours. Like we have seen in the past that there can be 5 bases, 6 bases. So for other overheads, I might use machine hours and I'll give a note why I'm using machine hours. So the ratio is 1 is to 2 is to 4 is to 1 is to 1. Information here which can have a relation with the area. But if you see that there are 10 points here and 10 items here, try to find a close approximate of each, and each information becomes useful. It is possible horsepower of machine may be used for two information, but then if one is going redundant, useless, futile, ensure that that is also used and give your foot why you are taking it on that basis. So now we have used all this information and we have got four different ratios on the basis of this. Divide 9,000, 6, 7, 8, 9. So again, simple 1,000, 2,000, 4,000, 1,000, and 1,000. Right? So you have done the first information of primary apportionment. Now you will do the secondary distribution. So what is required? Statement showing distribution of overheads to various departments. This we have done. And then we can take the totals also. But yeah, remember, when you are doing the totals, ignore this, ignore this, ignore this. These are not overheads. We have to show distribution of overheads to various departments. and then take the totals. Second, statement showing redistribution of service department expenses to the production departments. Now look at this. The benefit of X is going to A, B, C, but it is also going to Y. And similarly, the benefit of Y is going to A, B, not to C, but to X also. So this is a case of reciprocal, neither step nor direct. So we have reciprocal distribution, and within the reciprocal distribution, we can follow three methods: simultaneous, repeated, simultaneous equation, repeated, and trial and error. Trial and error we will not follow in the exam, even if no method is being mentioned. And then is also asking you to find out the machine hour rate. Okay. So this is an example if I am following repeated distribution A, B, C, X, Y. So first let me take the total of X and Y. It is 3,500, 3,750, 3,850, 4,850. And Y is 3,000, 4,000, 5,570. Okay. So redistribution of X, and the ratio of X is 45, 15, 30, 10. A, B, C, Y. So 4850 into 0.45. I don't know, but in exam you can speed up your calculations. For example, when I took 4850 into 0.45, I got this figure. The next one is one third of it, divide by 3. Next one is double of previous into 2. Then next one is again one third, divide by 3. So I don't have to type again and again 4850 into 0.45 into 0.15, so on. Okay, you're asking which note to give. Note to give in the sense why you have taken the depreciation on capital value, why you have applied other overheads on the basis of machine hours. So we have made an assumption that the overheads, other overheads have a relation, or the basis of allocation of other overheads is machine hours. Otherwise, if no other information is given, sundry overheads or other overheads can be taken on the basis of direct wage. So, all right, in this way you can allocate. Now you will get a total here of 5,000 or 6,002. So then redistributing Y amongst A, B, C, X, and the ratio is 60, 35, 5. 60, 35, C is not there, 5. So 6,002, 60% of this And 35% of this, 2100.7, I'll keep it 2101. Nothing is going to C, 5% is going to X. So 300.1 I am ignoring. Okay, just fill that, see the total, ignore this also. Next again, redistribution of X. So you'll continue until and unless you get 45% here. 300 into 0.45, 135, divide by 3, 45, into 2, 90, and then this is 30. Then you will distribute 30. 60% of 30 is 18, and 10.50, and 5% is 1.5. Maybe you can distribute this 1.5, again redistribution, and so on. Okay. But had you solved it reciprocal, X is equal to how much? 4850 plus 10% of Y, and Y is what? 5517 plus 5% of okay, X is 5% of Y, and Y is 10% from X. Ten percent of X and 0.05 Y. Now instead of Y, I will write this. So X becomes 4850 plus 5% of 5517, which is 275.85, 276 plus 0.005 X. So once again, 0.99X is equal to 5125.85, 5126, and therefore X is equal to 5126 divided by 0.995. 5152. When you will total this also, you will see 4850 plus 300, 5150 plus 1.5, 5151.56. So whether you go by repeated distribution and add 1 to all the positives one, you will get the same answer here also, and you'll get the same answer here also. So 5152 will be distributed amongst 45% of this, 15 and 30. So 90% of 5152 will be distributed amongst A, B, and C. Then it is also asking you to calculate the machine hour rate. So remember, the A already had a total of 2000, 3033. B already had a total of 2900, 3567. And C already had a total of 4000, 5530. So 3033, 3567, and 5533. Will be the statement showing the distribution of overheads, service department overheads, X and Y, to production departments A, B, C. Now, if you take the total of A, this is 3033 plus 2182.5 plus 3601 plus 135 plus 18. So you get a total of 8,969.50. And you are also asked to calculate the machine hour rate. So how many machine hours have been run amongst ABC? Here it is 1,000, 2,000, and 4,000. So 8,969.50 will be divided by 1,000. We'll say that the machine hour rate for department A is 8.969 or almost 9 rupees per hour. Similarly for B and C. So if you are being asked a question that there is a product which is manufactured and it passed through department A for 2 hours, for department B for certain number of hours, and C, you can calculate the overhead, absorb it at the basis of rupee 9 for A and so on for B and C. I hope this is clear. All right, you can take a short break and then we will start the second type of question, how to calculate the machine hour rate. If you have any doubts, you can ask during this 10 minutes. Yes, we have a 10 minutes. the break. So let's start this question. A machine shop has 8 identical drilling machines manned by 6 operators. So there are only 6 operators, but 8 machines. Now, the machines cannot be worked without an operator fully engaged on it. All right. So that means it's clearly implied that 2 machines will remain idle, they'll not be working. You can relate it to like you have in the transport business, if there are 8 buses and 6 drivers. So all the 8 buses cannot run on their own. Only 6 can run at a time. But the original cost of all these 8 machines works out to be 8 lakhs. And there is some information furnished for a 6 month period. So what it's saying is normal available hours per month are 208. There is absenteeism without pay. So we'll not pay for these 18 hours. But there is leave with pay for 20 hours. And then there is also normal time, which is unavoidable. So if it is unavoidable, this will also be paid and it is normal idle time. So this tells us that out of 200 days in a month minus 18, payment will be made for 190 hours every month. But the work done would be 208 minus 18 minus 20 minus 10. So the work would be executed only for 160 hours per month, every month or per month. So payment has to be made for 190 hours, but the work is to be executed only for 160 hours. What is the average rate of wages per day for 8 hours? 20 rupee for 8 hours. So calculate the hourly rate. 20 divided by 8, it is 2.5 rupee per hour. Okay. So you will be making a payment of 190 into 2.5, but the work would be done only for 160 hours. The production bonus estimated is 15% on the wages. So we will calculate what is the total wages for the 6 month period, and then we will add 15% bonus to that. And other expenses are very directly given: power consumed, supervision, lighting. So let's have first this working note. How many hours work is done and how many hours payment is made for. So work is done for 160 hours per person by 6 people, 6 operators, and this is every month. So for 6 months. So your work would be executed for 6 into 6 into 16. 5,760 hours. And payment would be made for 190 hours per worker for 1 month, for 6 months, and for 6 workers, and at the rate of 2.5 rupee per hour. I'll explain the wages and depreciation and fixed and standing charges. Just a minute. So 190 into 6 into 6 into 2.5. So your wages paid for the workers comes out to be 17,100. So these two working notes we have done. What is the total wage payment? And what is the total number of hours the factory has worked in the 6 months? So then there are other expenses: power 8050, supervision and indirect labor 3300, lighting and electricity 1200. And there was production bonus 15%. Then there are some particulars which are for the year. So first let us write what is the wages. What is the bonus? Power Bonus is 2565. Supervision 33, lightning 1200. Then there are some expenses which are for the year. Repairs and maintenance, including consumables. So value of the machines is 8 lakh. There are 8 machines, each of 100,000 or 1 lakh, right? So 3% of 8 lakhs, repairs and maintenance would be 2,400, 24,000. But remember, this information is given for the year. So we are preparing a statement for machine hour rate for a period of 6 months. So 8 lakh, 3% of 8 lakh is 24,000 per annum. So here it will be 12,000. Depreciation is mentioned as 40,000 per annum. So for 6 months, it would be 20,000. Insurance is 40,000. Sorry, insurance is 20,000. Depreciation is 10%. So depreciation is 40,000. 10% of 8 lakhs is 80,000. And for 6 months, it is 40,000. Insurance is 40,000 per annum. So for 6 months, it will be 20,000. Other sundry works expenses will be taken as 6,000. And general management expenses, 27,265. 54,530 divided by 2. You're required to work out the comprehensive machine hour rate for the machine shop. So basically, when you look at the machine hour, you calculate the overheads. And these are your overheads. But we are also taking wages and bonus because it is asking us to calculate the comprehensive machine hour rate, firstly. Now, when you prepare a statement of calculation of machine hour rate, you generally divide your expenses into standing charges and variable. So power is always variable. Supervision is standing charges. Lighting is taken as standing charges. Repairs and maintenance can be taken as variable or standing, but here as it is mentioned as 3%, so it is standing. Depreciation is also 8%, 10% of the value of machines. So in this case, it is standing. However, if depreciation was given as 5 rupee per hour of machine running, then it would become variable. Insurances are standing, sundry expenses are standing, general expenses allocation is standing. So just because most of the expenses here are standing, power you can write as variable, and that will be your total expenses. So once you've done this, add the total of all of it, 17,100 plus 2,565 plus 8,050 plus 3,300 plus 1,200 plus 12,000 plus 40,000 plus 20,000 and plus 6,000 plus 27,265. So the total is 1,37,480. and the machine hours were 5,760 in this 6 months period, right? 5760. So your machine hour rate is comprehensive machine hour rate, including wages, is 23.86. So rupee 23.87 per hour, per machine hour. So anytime the machine is running for 1 hour, you can charge 23.87 as a comprehensive machine hour rate. So this helps us in the sense that if you get a contract or a job for which you have to give a quotation, and you know that it will take 100 hours. If not comprehensive, we would ignore wages and bonus. We would take only the overheads. So if it is 100 hours, so you know that 23,870 would be your 2387 would be your expense for doing the job apart from material. So you can calculate the quote on the basis of this information. All right. Next, let's talk about the second concept here, which is ABC costing. So ABC costing is a very simple uh, concept, which is more scientific and more logical as compared to the traditional method which we have learned in the previous hour. So under the traditional method, we have create a predetermined rate for overheads, which could be on the basis of labor hour, machine hour, material cost, labor cost, or prime cost. So you divide all the overheads on the basis of this ratio or this predetermined rate, which may not be appropriate. So ABC is talking about a more scientific way in the sense it identifies what are the various activities on which cost is incurred. So you identify what activities are there on which cost is incurred, and then you find out what are the cost drivers for it. So there are two drivers basically. One is the resource driver and one is the activity driver. Depreciation should be calculated on productive hour if it is variable, and then it will be divided also by the productive hours. I'll take up the doubts related to overheads after the session. So let's focus on ABC costing. So you identify what are the activities on which the overhead cost is incurred. You identify the driver. So there are two drivers, basically resource driver and activity driver. So cost drivers means what instigates or what causes the cost to be incurred. So what resources are required? So for example, if there is activity that you have to deliver the goods to the customer's place, the activity is the activity is to do the number of do the delivery. So resources required would be the fuel or the petrol, and activities the more, if you do it 5 times, the resource would be required 5 times. If you do it 100 times, the resource would be required 100 times. So it's the frequency also of how many times you are doing that activity. So we find out what is the total cost incurred, what is the cost driver for that activity, how much was the total cost, and how many times the total cost driver was used. Total number of times the cost driver was used. And then we divide it by the total cost is divided by the total number of times the cost driver is used. We get the cost driver rate. That rate is established. For example, the total cost was activity was delivery of goods to the customer. Total cost was 10,000. The number of deliveries is the cost driver. And the total number of deliveries in this case was 20. So the cost driver rate would be 10,000 divided by 20. Every time there is a delivery, 500 rupees are incurred. Now, if you have two products or three products, A, B, C, and we know that the delivery for A was done 8 times, the delivery for B was done 5 times, and delivery for C was done 7 times. So you see that the total will turn out to be 20. So the total cost of delivery, the delivery overheads should be not charged at a combined blanket rate for all the possible deliveries, for all the possible overheads, but for delivery, it should be charged as 500 into 8, 4,000, 500 into 5, 2,500, and 500 into 7, 3,500. So this is how you will allocate each activity cost to the various product basis the cost driver. So if you have produced ABC in a machine and the activity is production, setup, run, and the total cost of setting up the machine was 50,000, and how many runs production run was set up, the cost driver is production run, and setup was done 100 times. So the cost would be, or 1,000 times, the cost would be 50 rupee per setup. Now, out of the 1,000 times, the machine was set up for A 600 times. It was done for A, 300 times it was done for B, and 100 times it was done for C. So 600 into 50, 3,000 will be charged to, 30,000 would be charged to A, 300 into 50, 15,000 would be charged to B, and 5,000 would be charged to C. So instead of taking one single rate, we have taken different rates for deliveries, a part of the overheads, and setup run, setup cost. So we have used different activities, and all activities are, the cost of each of the activity is charged to different product on the basis of how many times the cost driver was used for that particular product. Let us understand this further through a question. ABC Limited has a production department in which two products, P1 and P2, are produced. The total overhead cost of this department is 15,500. And the traditional method of allocating this is direct labor hours. So total labor hours was 3,100. 15,500 was the total cost, and 3,100 hours the labor has worked. So the absorption rate comes out to be, under the traditional method, 5 rupee per labor hour. And under the traditional method, how much expenses will be allocated for product P1, product P2? Labor hours incurred here are, for P1 only 100 hours, and for P2 3,000 hours. Absorption rate, overheads absorbed at the rate of P5 per labor hour. So P1 will be only getting 500 rupees as overhead charges, whereas P2 will be bearing 15,000. So all the substantial cost is borne by product P2. Okay, this is the traditional method. Now, how do we apply the ABC system, or more scientific method of absorbing the expenditure? So we see that the entire 15,500 is caused because of four different activities. So these are the four activities on which 15,500 expense was incurred. So sometimes you are handling the material, sometimes you are setting up the production, sometimes there are other variable cost, and sometimes you're also doing quality control. So for that also the cost of overheads is incurred. Now material handling cost comes out to be 4,200. And when you are handling the material, uh, the cost is driver is directly related to number of parts or maybe material request that has come for P1 and P2. So 4,200 is dependent upon number of parts. Setup cost is dependent upon number of production run. Variable cost is dependent upon labor hours, whereas quality control depends upon how many times the number of inspection was done. So like I said, we prepare a table where we write what is the activity, what is the total cost of the activity, what is the cost driver on which the activity cost is incurred, and then we prepare one more column, how many times the number of cost drivers used. So let's look at number of parts. So for that, we have further information. These are the number of parts per unit. 4 part per unit, 8 parts per unit. And how many units of A and B are made? P1 and P2 are made? 100 and 1000. So how many times the total parts must have been used for P1? 100 units into 4. Remember, it's given per unit. So 100 into 4, 400 parts are used for P1 and 1000 into 8, 8,000 parts are used for P2. So total number of parts used is 8,400. So number of times the cost driver is used is 8,400. Therefore, 4,200 divided by 8,400. The rate established is 0.50. Cost driver rate is 0.50. Is it clear to everyone? All right. Thank you, Divya, Dia. And Pooja, you've asked a question on machine hour rate. So you're saying sometimes we take the horsepower for apportioning power. Sometimes we take the machine hours. So if horsepower is available, use it, assuming all the machines are running for equal number of hours. If no horsepower of the machine is given, assume machine hours and assume that horsepower of all the machines, the power consumed by all the machines are almost same. But if horsepower and machine hours both are given and they are in different directions, multiply the two because the power consumption is a function of both the things. How many times you run it and what is the power. Compare it with your example of your electricity bill in your houses. You will have your electricity bill a function of whether you're running a fan or a AC. And then if fan is run for 24 hours and AC is run for just 1 hour, I think the power consumption would be same. So coming back to this, sorry for taking up that doubt of Pooja at this point. All right, so you have the activity, you have the amount, you have the cost driver, and the number of times the cost driver was used is 8,400 because it is parts. And number of parts are not given in totality, they are given per unit. 100 units of P1 is made. So 100 into 4 and 1000 into 8, 8,400 parts. So when 4,200 is divided by 8,400, the cost driver rate comes out to be 0.50. Second setup cost. The cost driver is number of production run. Here we have the total production run 7, not per unit. And you know that production run means the things are coming out in batches. So for you don't run a production run for each unit. So 7 is the total. Now 4,900 divided by 7, 700 is the cost driver rate. Then 3,100 labor hours. So labor hours are mentioned also 3,100. So this comes out to be 1 rupee per hour. And number of inspections is 3,300. Total 11 inspections have been undertaken. So 3,300 divided by 11. 300 is the inspection rate. Now we will calculate the cost per unit under the traditional and under the ABC. So cost of overhead per unit under ABC method. So P1, P2, units, overheads, material handling, setup, other variable costs, and inspection. So now it becomes very simple from the previous table. How many parts were used? Basis is parts, and parts are used in the ratio of 408,000. And the cost driver rate was 0.5 rupee per part. So this will bear 200 and this will bear 4,000. So total expenditure in material handling was 4,200. You can make several columns for this. Units, overheads, cost of overheads, ratio of overheads, and the rate. Or you can do this calculation here, 400 into 0.5 and 8,000 into 0.5. Setup basis is production run. Total cost of production run was 4,900, or setup cost was 4,900. Production run was done 7 times, 2 and 5 for P1 and P2. Rate is 700. So just write here 4,900 total cost. 2 into 700. And 5 into 700. So the way 4,900 is allocated is 1,400 and 3,500. Next is other variable cost. Total is 3,100, labor hours 103,000. So 100 and 3,000. You can write here 100 into 1 and 1,000 into 1. Last is inspection. The total inspection cost is 3,300. And the cost driver was number of times the inspection was done, 4:7, 11. And the rate comes out to be 300. 400, 4 into 300, 1,200. And 7 into 300, 2,100. So on the basis of ABC, the total overheads charged to product P1 is 200 plus 1,400 plus 100 plus 1,200, and it comes out to be 2,900. Per unit rate is 2,900 divided by 100 at the rate of 29 rupee per unit. For product P2, 4,000 plus 3,500 plus 3,000 plus 2,100. So it is 12,600. You will also ensure that you verify your calculations. 12,600 plus 2,900, 15,500. So that means calculations are correct. Divide by 1,000. So this comes out to be at the rate of 12.60 per unit. Whereas under traditional method, it was 500 divided by 100, 5 rupee per unit only. And here also 15,000 divided by 3,000, 5 rupee per unit. But we have done a more justified way of doing the calculations by following the ABC method. Right. So this is more appropriate and it is giving tremendous difference in the per unit rate by applying the two different methods. So ABC is more scientific. Let us take one more question. It is slightly different in the sense here, once again, Stud Limited produces four products, A, B, C, D, and the cost information is given. For A, material, labor cost, machine hours per unit. How many machine hours are used and what is the output? So products are generally produced in batches of 20. So this means production run. How many times production run has been undertaken? What is the batch size? 20. And it is same for A, B, C, D. So 6 production run has been done for A, 5 production run has been done for B, 4 production run has been done for C, and 6 production runs have been done for D. A total of 21 production runs. Then orders are executed in multiples of 10 only. The different activities of production have been grouped into 5 classes with cost drivers and overhead cost. So these are the 5 reasons why the cost of overheads has come up because of machinery, because of setup cost, because of storing, because of inspection, and because of material handling. So setup cost was 5250, and how many times the number of runs has been done? 21, which we have calculated also. So when you will divide 5250 by 21, the cost driver rate, because of constraint of time, here I am using the question itself as part of my solution. So statement of finding out the cost driver rate. So setup cost is 5250 divided by 21. It is 5250 rupees. Storing 3600 depends upon how many times the request has come. The total request has come is 80. So 3600 divided by 80. 45 rupee per requisition. And it is said that 20 requisitions have happened for all the 4 products. So this is same. 45 into 20, 900 will go to all 4. 900 into 4, 3600. Third expenses inspection depends upon number of runs. So once again, same, that inspection is also on the basis of number of runs. So 6, first establish the rate, 2100 divided by 21. So it comes out to be 100 rupee per run. So here it will be 600, 500, 400, 600. Then 4620, material handling depends upon number of orders executed. And it is saying orders are executed in multiples of 10. So although it should be coming underneath, but I'm writing here orders executed in multiples of 10. So 120 divided by 10, 100 divided by 10, 80 divided by 10, 120 divided by 10. So total number of orders executed would be 20, 30, 42. and which is given also. So 4620 divided by 42, it's 110. So you require to calculate the cost per unit for each of the products under traditional costing as well as ABC system. So under traditional costing, what method we use? Overheads per traditional costing is absorbed on the basis of machine hours. So if nothing would have said, we would have taken some reasonable base, but here we'll take machine hours. So what is the information about machine hours? Directly nothing, but it is said machine hour per unit. So another information we'll have to calculate here for A, B, C, and D. Machine hours are 120 into 4, 480. 4 hours per unit, 120 units. So 120 into 4, multiply the 2. So for this, it will be 300. For product C, it will be 80 into 2, 160. And for product D, it would be 120 into 3, 360. And the total would be 1300. So if this information would not have been given, you have calculated it yourself. If this information would not have been given, you have calculated yourself. If this information would not have been given, you have still calculated yourself. So this was not given and you calculated 1300. Now the first expense, machinery, 10,430 divide by 1300. This cost driver rate is a little fractional, 8.023. Let me check the calculation. 120 into 4 is 480 plus 300 plus 80 into 2 is 160 plus 120 into 3 is 360. 1300 and 10,430 divide by 1300 is 8.023. So we'll keep it roughly 8. So you requested to calculate the cost per unit under the traditional method. So what is the total cost? 26,000. So under traditional method, what will happen? A, B, C, D, machine hours 480, 300, 160, and 360. Total 1300. Machine hour rate 8.023 into 480. It is 3851 divided by 48 into 30, 2407. All these are rounded off figures. 1284. Now I see here 7 and 1, 8, 8 and 4, 12. So this one was coming out to 888.3. I will ignore that. 0.3, 26,000. So under traditional method, this is the overheads absorbed by the 4 products. Now let us look at ABC. So you will write here overhead cost. Total of that and cost driver rate. So the overheads are handling, setup, variable, and quality. Sorry. Machine setup, storing, inspection, material handling. Machinery setup, storing, material handling, and inspection. The total of machinery is 10,430. Cost driver at the rate of 8.0323. 5250. And the cost driver is rate is 250. So you will allocate 10,430 amongst A, B, C, D in the ratio of 8.023. So in this, we have allocated the entire 26,000, but now you will allocate only the 10,423. Sorry, under traditional method, 26,000 is to be divided by 1,300. So the rate is 20. 8.023 is for only the machine. So this information is relevant here. 3851, 2407, 1284, and 2888. So the total is 10,430. This is divided by 1,300. So it's 20 rupee per rate under the traditional method. Four 480 into 20, 9,600, 6,000. Now this will total to 26,000. 9 and 6, 15, 16, 17, 18, and right. So machine has been allocated. 10,420 has been allocated amongst the four. Setup is 250, and the setup was 6,546. Six, five, four, six. So 250 into 6, 250 into 5, 250 into 4, and 250 into 6 is again 1,500. Your inspection was also in the same ratio. 100 rupee per run. So 600, 500, 400, and 600. Material handling was done 42 times. 12, 10, 8, 12. So the ratio is same, 6, 5, 4, 6. Storing is left. Storing is 20, 45, 20 for each product. So 20 into 45, 900 each. So this is how you will get the total. And this total will be different from your 9600, which you have got here. So as far as ABC is concerned, for A, it will be 3851 plus 1500 plus 900 plus 600 plus 1320. So it comes out to be 8171. And similarly, for some others, it will be less. For some others, it will be higher. But the total will be 26,000 only. So this is how you do the allocation between traditional and ABC. So I hope this is clear. Last, I have taken a case scenario. So sales department is analyzing the customer profitability for its product. Inspection is not fully allocated, 2100 against 3100. Inspection, 2100. And total number of times 21. So 6546, 21. So 2100 divided by 2100, 21, it was 100 rupees. So 600, 500, 400, 600. It is allocated. This is 2100 actually. I've written it wrong. Inspection cost was 2100. 5250, 3600, 2100, and 460. Right. Thank you for taking note of this. So when you will have the totals also here, you will get do the totals diagonally, vertically, horizontally, in all ways, so that if there is any error, it will come to the light. Right. Okay. So next is your sales. This is the case scenario. This is in your study material also. You can do it from here, there. I'll explain how it is to be done. Sales department is there of A Limited. It is analyzing the customer profitability for the product C. Now we are doing the analysis as per the customers. So we have 5 customers, A, B, C, D, E. Instead of having an overall profit, let's see how each customer is being profitable to us. So we have taken these 5 customers, and the cost of buying the product is 5,400 per unit. Okay, so you are selling it at 64802 to A, 6372 to B, 5940 to C, 6264 to D, and 5832 to E. But across all the 5 customers, our cost of material is 5,400. Apart from this is the data that you have. They have given how many purchase orders, how many times customer visited, how many times the goods were delivered to the customer, how many kilometers were traveled per delivery, and how many numbers of expedited delivery. That means they asked in emergency. So A, B, C, D did not ask for any emergency. Expedited deliveries was only for E. Now, kilometers are traveled per delivery. So you should be knowing how many deliveries were made to them. So 10 deliveries were made and kilometers traveled was 20 per delivery. So total kilometers traveled would be 200 for A, 180 for B, 300 kilometers for C, and 400 kilometers for D, whereas 600 kilometers for E. So, though C was quite near, only 5 kilometers away, but we had given 60 deliveries. And then you will see what is the different cost. So, order taking is 4,500 per purchase order. So, how many were the purchase orders? 15 plus 25, 40, 70, 95, 125. So total number of times this cost driver was undertaken is 125, and the cost driver rate, okay, 4,500 cost driver rates are given. Cost drivers are not given, cost driver rates are given. So we don't need to calculate the cost driver rates. We only needed to apply it to A, B, C, D, E at the rate of 4,500 per order. So how many orders? 15, 25, 30, 25, 30. So for this, 4,500 into 15, 4,500 into 30, 25, 4,500 into 30, 4,500 into 25, and 4,500 into 30. So this is the overheads incurred for order taking. 3,600 per visit. Customer visits are also given, 23623. So multiply this amount by 2, 3, 6, 2, 3. Okay. Then next is deliveries, 750 per delivery kilometer traveled. So for this, 200, 180, 300, 400, 600. This into 200, one 80, sorry, 300, 400, and 600. Product handling, 22.50 per case sold. So how many number of cases have been sold? 4,500, 6,000, 9,500, 750, 500, and 12,750. So you will multiply this expense by this, and expedited delivery, that is only for E. So this expense will go only to E. So in this way, you will have allocated all the expenditures of overheads and you can take the total. Now what is asked is how much cost on customer visit is incurred on customer E? How much cost on customer visit on E? So what is the rate of customer visit? 3,600. How many times the customer visit was there for E? 3. 3,600 into 3, 10,800. What is the cost of goods sold for customer D? What is the cost of goods sold for customer D? So for customer D, 7,500 units are sold. Cost of goods sold will be 7,500 into 5,400 units. This is the total raw material cost. Apart from this, whatever the total of overheads come here, that you will add, that will become the cost of goods sold for customer C. Okay. 7,500 into 5,400, which is 4 crore 5 lakhs. Apart from that, you will also add, we are saying cost of goods sold. So cost of goods sold has everything. So whatever the total comes out from D that you will also have to add. Similarly, how much is the cost of expediting delivery of customer A? Because expediting delivery was done only for C, it is 0. E, so A did not ask for any expedited delivery, therefore 0. Customer level operating income of customer A. So once again, income from customer A. For that, you will do 4,500 into 6,480 will be your sales. 4,500 into 5,400 would be your cost of goods sold, the total cost, and the overheads will be taken from here. When that will be subtracted, you will get the profit from customer A. So similarly, you will do the operating income for D and E, which means when you are calculating the operating income here for customer D, you can take only the cost of goods sold as 7,500 into 54 because operating income is separately asked. Okay, right. So this is all I have for today. Yeah, 4 lakh, 4 crores for 50 lakh. All right. So one question in chat window was in material invoice 1,200 is taken or 1,250. So expenses you might have, which are common to all, will be taken for 1,250, but will be divided for 1,200. Okay. So try to complete this. And I hope the session was fruitful to you. You have understood and revised the two chapters of overheads and ABC. Just like ABC, you have the activity-based budgeting also and activity-based management also. Same concepts are applicable. Thank you all. Bye. Have, yes, done. Have a good day and study hard. All the best. Bye. Right. Thank you.